When people think about Scorpio's strongest connections, they usually picture water or earth signs. After all, those signs seem to understand Scorpio's emotional depth and intensity. But the air signs tell a completely different story. They don't meet Scorpio where Scorpio already is, they move Scorpio somewhere new. Astrologically, each air sign activates a different psychological mechanism within Scorpio. So, which air sign has the strongest hold on a Scorpio? Let's take a closer look. Libra. At first glance, Scorpio and Libra can seem like an unlikely match. Scorpio is often guided by instinct, by emotional conviction, and by a desire to understand what lies beneath the surface. Libra approaches life differently. Ruled by Venus, Libra naturally considers multiple perspectives. Rather than rushing to conclusions, Libra weighs both sides, searches for fairness, and asks questions that invite reflection instead of immediate judgment. For Scorpio, that can be surprisingly captivating. Scorpio is incredibly perceptive when it comes to understanding other people, but understanding themselves can be a different story. Once Scorpio forms an opinion or trusts an instinct, they often commit to it wholeheartedly. Their emotional convictions run deep, and because of that, they don't always stop to ask whether another perspective might reveal something they've overlooked. Libra naturally introduces that pause, not by arguing or by trying to change Scorpio, but simply by seeing the situation from an angle Scorpio hadn't considered before. Over time, Scorpio begins to notice something unexpected. Conversations with Libra don't always leave them emotionally overwhelmed, they leave them thinking, replaying the discussion, considering another point of view, questioning assumptions they once felt completely certain about. That's the attraction. Libra doesn't compete with Scorpio's emotional depth. Libra gives that depth another dimension. There's also a gentleness to the way Libra approaches conflict that can be surprisingly refreshing for Scorpio. Where Scorpio wants to uncover the truth as directly as possible, Libra understands that timing, diplomacy, and empathy can shape the outcome just as much as the truth itself. Scorpio may not always agree with Libra's approach, but they often come to respect it. Because beneath Libra's calm exterior is someone who understands that wisdom isn't only about knowing what's true, it's also about knowing how to bring people together. A Libra doesn't simply make Scorpio feel understood, they make Scorpio understand themselves a little more differently. If Libra encourages Scorpio to reflect, Gemini keeps Scorpio's mind in motion. A Gemini doesn't experience the world in a straight line. One conversation leads to another. One idea sparks five more. Curiosity isn't something Gemini turns on and off. It's simply the way they move through life. For Scorpio, that's both unfamiliar and incredibly engaging. Scorpio naturally prefers to go deep. When something captures their interest, they want to understand every layer, every motive, and every hidden meaning before moving on. Gemini approaches knowledge differently. Rather than digging one deep well, Gemini explores an entire landscape. They ask unexpected questions, connect ideas that seem unrelated, and have a way of turning ordinary conversations into something neither person anticipated. That's what captures Scorpio's attention. Not that Gemini is difficult to understand, but because every conversation feels alive. Just when Scorpio thinks they know where the discussion is going, Gemini introduces another perspective, another story, or another possibility that shifts the entire conversation. For someone who enjoys learning, that kind of mental agility can be incredibly magnetic. Scorpio may even notice themselves becoming more curious around Gemini, more willing to entertain ideas without immediately deciding whether they're right or wrong. more comfortable allowing a conversation to unfold without needing to reach a conclusion. Gemini reminds Scorpio that not every meaningful discussion needs an answer. Sometimes the value is simply in exploring the question. That doesn't mean these two always agree. In fact, they often won't. Scorpio seeks certainty. Gemini enjoys possibility. Scorpio wants to arrive at the truth. Gemini enjoys discovering where the conversation might lead next. Yet it's often those differences that keep them talking because every discussion feels like an invitation to think differently. A Gemini doesn't simply capture Scorpio's attention, they keep Scorpio's mind endlessly engaged. If Gemini keeps Scorpio's mind engaged, Aquarius expands it. And Aquarius has a way of questioning ideas that most people simply accept. They aren't afraid to think differently, challenge convention, or explore possibilities that others dismiss without a second thought. For Scorpio, that's deeply intriguing. Aquarius approaches truth differently. Rather than asking, "Is this true?" Aquarius often asks, "What if we've been looking at it the wrong way all along?" That single question can completely shift the direction of a conversation, and Scorpio notices. Not because Aquarius is trying to be rebellious, but because their mind naturally searches beyond the obvious. That's the attraction. Aquarius doesn't simply offer Scorpio new information, they offer an entirely new way of thinking. Conversations between these two often drift towards subjects that don't have simple answers. Human nature, society, philosophy, the future, the kind of questions that leave both people thinking long after the conversation has ended. Around Aquarius, Scorpio may notice themselves becoming more open to uncertainty, less concerned with defending what they already know, more interested in exploring what they have yet to discover. That doesn't weaken Scorpio's depth, it gives that depth a broader horizon. Aquarius reminds Scorpio that growth isn't only about looking inward, sometimes it comes from stepping outside your own perspective and allowing your understanding of the world to evolve. A Scorpio may not agree with everything Aquarius believes. In fact, they probably won't. But agreement isn't what creates the connection. Respect is. Because Scorpio recognizes someone who has the courage to think independently, even when it means standing apart from the crowd. And Aquarius doesn't simply broaden Scorpio's perspective. They encourage Scorpio to imagine possibilities that never seemed possible before. So, which air sign is Scorpio most attracted to? After looking at all three, I don't think there's a single answer. A Libra encourages Scorpio to reflect. A Gemini keeps Scorpio mentally engaged, and Aquarius expands Scorpio's perspective. And depending on where Scorpio is in life, any one of those attractions can become the strongest. Of course, this is only looking at each sign in isolation. In real life, no one is just their sun sign. A Scorpio with strong air placements may experience these dynamics very differently than a Scorpio with a chart full of earth or fire. The full birth chart will always tell a much richer story. I'm curious what you've seen. If you're a Scorpio, which sign has left the biggest impression on you? And if you're an Aquarius, Libra, or Gemini, what has your experience with Scorpio been like? Did any of this resonate, or was your story completely different? I'd love to hear your perspective because sometimes the most interesting part of astrology isn't the theory, it's the stories that either confirm it or challenge it.